My name is Adam Overdeer, and this is my real story. My parents, they modeled us what a Christian home was to be like, and they modeled faith. We were at church every Sunday, and we went on Wednesdays. I would say towards junior high, when I started getting involved in Youth for Christ and campus life, that, I think that's when your faith kind of becomes your own, not so much when you're little. Youth for Christ made a big impact. Tom Rapchek was the campus life director at that time. My youth group at church, we would do mission trips and stuff. So I think through that, I started to learn more about who I was. I started going to college at Huntington to pursue, I wanted to, because Tom was my role model, I started to pursue a ministry degree, and that's where he went, and so I started there, and financially I couldn't afford it, and I ended up at IPFW, and through a friend of mine, Lorna and I started dating. We met through some friends of ours that were married, and I hunted with him, and she was a girlfriend of, the wife, Amy. I would see this magnet on the refrigerator, and it was her picture, and I just kept telling her, who's that, or and then she finally introduced me to Lorna. So I went to IPFW, and I was just I was also interested in the criminal justice stuff, and I was working part-time for a mechanical contractor, and it just ended up that through schooling, and Lorna and I were getting more serious, and I wasn't going to finish college at that time as I was pursuing her. I took a full-time job, doing piping, and got into the apprenticeship. I thought I was going to college, and I ended up in a skilled trade instead, which is I'm happy with. But you think you're headed one direction and you're pulled another. None of the degrees I pursued at first I ended up with. It was like kind of a no-brainer, as I'm going this way. I think that marriage has been probably the biggest spiritual journey for me, just because when you first get married, you're still kind of unfamiliar with each other. You've never lived with another person, and you get married and you're trying to figure each other out, and how your role should be defined as a husband and hers as a wife. And I think that when you're first married, I feel like that you argue about stupid things that you don't even care about, just because you're trying to define your own role. And working through some of those things as a husband and a wife, and really learning what God calls of you as a husband and wife, I think that's brought me probably the farthest in my spiritual journey, is where God defines my role as a husband and a father versus what I defined it as, right? I think that you start to realize what God calls you as a man and a husband and a father to be. And it's not just from one Bible study or one book or one part of the Bible, but I think that by trying to take the time to spend time in the Word on a daily basis, that I think God uses you to transform your attitude and your thought process about yourself and how you view her. In Ephesians, where it's talking about the roles of a husband and a wife, it doesn't say that to lead your wife in your home, that you have to tell her what to do. It says to love your wife as Christ loved the church. Christ died for the church, and it's to lay your own wants and desires and put hers ahead of yours. You should think kingdom oriented. If I can lift her up and support her in a way God is moving in her life, or she does that for me, I think that takes it makes a lot of the silly things that you argue about just seem stupid, and not, why even have that discussion? To take your thought process off of each other and your own desires, and because this is, your life is not eternal here on earth. I think it's more of trying to show Jesus to your kids and your wife, and to treat them the way he calls us to. It's been hard, and I'm not perfect by any means, but I think that the closer I stay to him, as far as spending time with him on a daily basis, it helps me tremendously, just because I can tell personally myself, if I don't spend time in the Word every day, it affects how I treat people at work or at home, or if I'm not spending time with him first and foremost, it affects every other relationship I have. That's something I've been learning more and more in the last couple of years, just that I have to stay grounded in him, or it's so easy to not, and to push it away. When you choose to have a family and you go down that path, I think that you have the responsibility to them. Seth and I were raised that if you're going to do something, you do it the best or you don't do it. Lorna and I's biggest prayer is that, the boys would know and follow Jesus every day in their lives. Well, if we don't live that, how are they ever going to? We pray for the boys daily and just, try and model what we want of them and what we want them to be, because they're going to have to make their own decisions, as life gets harder and they get older and they start to make life choices. Hopefully we've modeled for them what they'll want in life, and they see that hopefully in the way I treat her and they're treated at home. Your legacy that you leave for your kids, there's so many stories in the Bible where you see where kings, turned away and then their children failed and their children failed, but the kings that were faithful to God and they screwed up too, but they tried to be obedient. And half the Old Testament is about that people that were faithful, they had generations of people that followed the Lord and generations that didn't follow him. I think that the legacy that Monagene has created with her family, they have generations of believers. I think that would be the biggest thing that I could do for my family, is that what Lorna and I model for the boys, that they would someday continue to model for their kids and their children. I think that would be the greatest thing to do.